project.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, so we have this screen, right, where you can create a project and it asks you a bunch of questions that maybe you don't actually need to fill in all those things, right? The minimum that you need to create a project would be the name, and even the visibility, you could set a smart default for it, right? Most people probably want them to be private and not public, so you could actually just ask them for a name, and then you land on a page where you can maybe fill in other information. So this was an idea that Jeremy, who was PM on Manage back then, now I think he's still on Manage, but he's like, what is his title? I don't remember. Yeah, but above the other PMs, right? Which makes sense because he's been involved with this stuff for a long time. So he came up with this thing and said, let's try to just create a project with like 1 or 2 clicks. You just put a name in it, or maybe not even a name. Some web applications even do that for you. You just say, I want to create a project or create a document, and they just create a blank new thing for you, and then you add in a name, and then you choose the visibility. It's just that way of controlling that perceived performance, right? Or a speed of doing things. So you click something, it's created, now you start filling in the information that you want to fill in. Maybe it's an avatar, it's a name, it's visibility, it's the description, whatever. And he had an idea of, yeah, in Google Docs, you go, you say file and new document or something like that, and it just creates a new document for you. It says that it's untitled, but you can start filling in the information. And other applications do something similar, where you just create something new and they will pick like a random name for you, right? Like a pink unicorn or something, right? And then you go and change it. So that was, I think, the most original or the most, out of the blue idea that we maybe explored or played with. But then, I don't know, we just started working on other things and we never really explored it further. And we kind of concluded, let's try to simplify the current screen because of the MVC approach that we have at GitLab, right? Let's try to maybe stash some things under like advanced settings, accordion or something like that, and just ask for the most basic information so that we speed up the process, which I think is fine. It's MVC for sure, but what I think we need is like a really good vision for this thing, and we didn't have it back then, to be honest. As I said, we maybe explored an idea that could be a vision, like you create a new project with 1 or 2 clicks and then you start populating it, but we never really explored it. And we said, let's do this MVC, and even that MVC didn't go anywhere. So we still have the same old project creation page today, right? And then I saw somewhere you shared recently the approach to putting more emphasis on the import and start from a template options, right? Where you had the 4 options side by side. I think it was in a UX showcase. Yep. And I think that's a really good start because it's a drastic change from what we currently have. You can get some feedback, you can see how it works. But as I said, I really think there needs to be like a vision. What do users want to do when they're creating projects? Because back then we even had an idea of, yeah, some users are using GitLab just for creating projects and groups like on a daily basis, right? Like admins or PMs or whatever. So I guess that needs to be explored a bit more. Why, how do they want to create these projects? What of the 4 options would they find the most valuable? And then it also, I guess it depends on what stage are they currently at in terms of adopting GitLab. Because this is really important, right? If you just start using GitLab, you want to create a project because it makes sense, but without a project, you can't really use it. But you end up on that page where we ask you for the name, for the URL, and visibility, and you completely miss the whole tabs section where you have the 3 other options. It's not doing a favor in terms of selling GitLab as a really a tool with all these features, right? So you can import a project from GitHub. You miss that, and maybe that user or that team doesn't convert because of that, because they currently have all their projects in GitHub and they don't want to manually move them. They want to just import them. They miss that feature and they move on. They don't come back to GitLab, right? Or they want to because maybe they're an agency and they want to start projects from templates because it makes sense to them, because they save time. We have a bunch of templates in there, and again, they miss that feature and they'll skip on GitLab, right? So there are two main options. One would be creating something really quick, starting with blank and then populating it. And the other one would be putting more emphasis on all the different options that are available. And maybe you can even combine the two. Maybe you just create a project and then you have in that project overview page when it's blank, when it's empty, because our current empty stage screen for the project overview page is quite poor. You just have a bunch of instructions how to clone that project to your machine, basically, right? Maybe there you could have those 4 options that you started exploring, right? Where you say, hey, I just created this project. Now I want to import this repository from GitHub or something, right? But that's basically like a summary of what we, think about and what we did, but never really got anywhere. And maybe where you could go in the future. And I remember I spoke to Daniel about this at some point as well, and I told him the exact same thing. I don't think we were aggressive enough in terms of, can we completely rethink this flow? It seems like a really simple flow, but I think it's a really vital one, and it's not as simple as it may seem at the beginning. But yeah, can we design it so that it fits exactly what 80% of our users tend to do with projects?
Yeah. I think, thank you for explaining all of it. And I didn't know you were on Manage before.
Yeah, it was.
That makes more sense now.
Yeah, I was for 1.5 years, I think.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
Then, if you don't mind, I'd love to share designs once we kind of get going.
Sure.
You have so much, knowledge in this area. That would help me out a lot. I did have a question. I noticed in your prototype, you did make a comment saying that in the prototype, I'm talking about kind of the Google Docs example where you just create a project, and then once you're in that project, you can then add to it. And I believe one of your comments said that kind of that prototype satisfies like the need for importing one repository versus multiple. So I think that would be a significant challenge. I think taking your prototype and turning that into a more scalable approach, but yeah, I was just curious if you had any, any initial thoughts on what that means to import multiple repositories, or if that wasn't necessarily a concern at the time for this.
No, it wasn't. And one of the main problems for us as well is, for us, projects are repositories, basically, right? What's a repository on GitHub for us is a project. So you could import multiple repositories to a group and they become projects in a group, but importing multiple repositories into a project, you can't really do that, right? And again, I think this is something that's probably unclear to users. It was unclear to me when I first joined as well. Because if you go to the import tab and you connect to your GitHub account and you see all of your repositories there and you just say import, there's no indication that this will be added to your GitLab account as a project. I do believe you have a choice to select where it will get imported, but I'm not sure anymore.
I'm sorry, say that again, where it will get imported?
Yeah,
I don't
I
know.
think you can choose that.
Can you? I don't.
Let me quickly check. Project. But even just the CTA, right? I'm on the project's dashboard page where all the projects are listed. It says new project, right? Yeah. And I assume it's just creating a new project. It doesn't imply that there are other options like creating from a template or importing a project. How do I go about finding the option for importing a project where all CTAs are just labeled new project? Yeah. So this is also one of the options that I remember we explored was having a menu for creating projects or something like that, and you would have all these options there where you would have import a project or a repository, I think it would say, or create from a template, so that from the start it would be clear that you have all these options. Yeah. Especially because of the tabs and because they are not easy to see them. So import projects, GitHub. Let's see if my account is, I'm not connected anymore. Okay, now I would need to authenticate again. I don't have my phone with me, so I need to log in. But it doesn't really matter at this point. I think you can choose the destination of where the repository will get imported. But yeah, it was all these things, right? How do you tell the users that they can import, and how do you tell them that they can start from a template? When I first joined GitLab, we didn't even have the templates. We just had the import, new project, and external CI/CD, if I remember correctly. But yeah, and then you sorry, go ahead.
But we're actually conducting interviews to see if it even makes sense to have the import feature kind of coupled with the new project creation. Like, should that be together or should that live separately? So we should find that information out soon, and I think that could significantly change how we handle. I conducted 2 interviews yesterday, and both of them said that they expected the import feature to fall under the new project creation, but we have a handful more folks to talk to regarding this. But let's see. Oh, I did have a question. So for the advanced options that you have in your prototype that fall under the collapsible area, as far as adding an avatar, description, how did you decide that those are kind of the key fields that users would want or need to fill out when creating a project?
So there's no particular logic behind that, I would say. It was just about trying to minimize that form and then stashing other things under advanced settings, I think we call them, or something like that. Mm-hmm. And the avatar is not a part of that form when you're creating a project, but I think it is when you're creating a group. So we also tried to kind of consolidate the 2 different approaches. Let me check. Yeah, group avatar. You can choose a group avatar from the new group page. So that they would be you would have the similar options there for groups and for projects. So that's why avatar landed in there. And then the idea was, if I want to create a project in the fewest number of interaction possible, this screen, as it was designed, as it was prototyped, you could do it there. If you want to fill in the description, the title, the avatar, the visibility, and all those things, right? You would expand that accordion, you would put in all the stuff, and you would be done in a single page. So that was the idea. But to be honest, I'm not sure if it's worth exploring further.
Really?
Yeah, because I think it's more important to put more emphasis on the other features that we have, which is importing and templates, right? And even when we worked on this redesign of this create a project page, I think templates were just starting to become a thing. Like 2 or 3 milestones before that, I think we received first templates ever, and it wasn't such a big thing. But now when I go into create a project, there's tons of these templates, and it's a shame that users don't really see them.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And that's the point of doing the kind of the redesign of the project creation page. So instead of having tabs, we have pulled them out to make discoverability a bit easier. So just by doing A/B testing, we're able to see or have an even better understanding of like what features are folks using. Because of the graph that you shared, where 90% or so of folks are creating a blank project. So that'll be interesting, just so we can see specifically kind of which feature users are engaging with. And one that I struggle with is the, what is it, run CI/CD on external repositories.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on having that coupled with the new project creation capabilities? Did that make sense for you to have it? Because I think I remember a comment you had made within the, and I can't remember the specific comment, but I think you were questioning whether or not that.
Yeah, I remember we discussed it, but again, we didn't, end up with any concrete conclusions. My point was, it feels out of place there. It doesn't feel. If I was looking for something like this, I wouldn't expect it to be in the new project creation flow. Mm-hmm. But then again, where do you put it? Right. That's the other problem.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, it feels out of place. Mm-hmm. But where else could you put it so that it would make more sense? Does it make sense to then just change how the progression of the steps in the project creation go? So you create a project, and then you say, yes, but this project will serve me as only for connecting GitLab CI to another repo that I have somewhere else. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense to our users? I'm not sure. But then again, we're coming back to that group and project understanding of our users. Do they get it? Do they know what a group is? Do they know what a project is? And this is something that we're working on in growth, not my team specifically, but conversion and acquisition. They are working on this because they are trying to build it into the sign up flow. So you sign up, and then you create a group, and then you create a project, right? So it's like a logical succession of steps that would also explain what a group is, and then that the project you are creating is part of the group that you just created. So I think that should help. And maybe just because of that, we should stay coordinated in terms of, if we manage to actually improve the understanding of groups and projects with our users, I'll need to keep you updated, right? Because it's such a vital part of, if you understand what they are, then creating them is so much, makes a lot more sense, and it's much easier to kind of grasp the whole idea of, a project is this. I can create it from a template, or I can import a repository. It's basically a repository, but it can also be just a project for tracking issues, right? Mm-hmm. There's not always a repository connected to a project. And yeah, one thing I remember was the instructions on the left side, right, on the new project page. They're just too long.
No one reads
just yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, we, in fact, the new designs that we're doing A/B testing, we've significantly reduced the amount of copy.
Nice.
Because of that reason. No one's reading it. And okay, we have a minute left. Sorry. One last question. Did you do, or do you have any thoughts around discoverability? Meaning, like, because users now have to go up to either click the plus mark in the navigation or click the call to action button, new project. Did you have any initial thoughts around findability or discoverability rather?
Of this project creation flow?
Yes.
I've something that I would possibly like to explore, and maybe even with the growth and specifically the expansion team, would be having a create a new project button in the projects menu. Right, because you click currently on the projects menu item, projects actually. Yeah. It shows you this drop down, frequently visited, and then you have a couple of options in the left side, but there's no create a project button or something. Maybe I would expect it there, maybe other users as well, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I've thought about too, that makes sense to me to have it in that area, but again, we'll find out more from our user interviews. But like I said, the two that I did yesterday, they expected it to be, you know, where it's located.
Interesting.
Yeah, but
yeah,
we'll see.
Okay. Yeah, and the expansion group on Grove now owns the navigation, right? Because before nobody owned navigation. Okay. So at some point, I think we'll be looking into improvements like this in general.
Okay, great. Yeah. Anything that I, you know, think will affect the navigation, of course, I'll run it by you all. Yeah. And and I would love to share any initial designs or initial thoughts with you, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah.
We're not. I don't have anything to share yet, but.
Okay. Cool.
Thank you so much, Matej. I really appreciate it.
Sure. Yeah, no problem.
We'll talk soon.
Yeah, I'll see you in the next call, right?
Yeah.
See you next week. Cool. Yeah. See you. Bye.